They're emotionally broken, they're obviously physically broken, and they need help with it.
Many men also normalize feeling less than their best, fatigue, weight gain, energy decline, the brain fog.
So many of them, when I ask them how they feel, they actually don't know what that means. They've kind of normalized to a default state where they don't feel that good. And then on top of that, they've been gaslighted by the medical establishment or their friends and family. There's nothing wrong with them. And so they kind of feel like there's nowhere to turn.
It's not just about the six pack and getting on the scale. It's about, your relationships with your wife.
What in my life made the greatest difference when I solved this problem for myself was that like emotional component of it, to like where you have the ability to cope with the stress of life, to have purpose and motivation and drive.
It's your lion and it's your drive. And I think it's why so many successful men, they prioritize this. Your family needs you healthy. Your business needs you healthy. Don't wait to fix it when it's broken. Hi, everyone. Mike Brookins here, one of the founding members of Eternity Health Partners. I'm here with Hunter Williams, men's educator, coach for everything men's health. Why do you think men tend to delay prioritizing their health?
Yeah, well, thank you for having me on, Mike. I will say when it comes to men, I've, like you, worked with thousands of men. And I think especially a lot of the men that we deal with, they're providers. So men, they like to protect, provide, and preside over their family, hopefully, or just whatever dominion they're in. And men are providers. And typically when someone's a provider, they usually put themselves last. And that can be good for a season of life. But if you do that for a few decades and you never prioritize your own health, you're actually not going to be the best provider for your family or whoever it is that you're attempting to provide for. So I think when we look at men, I know a lot of the guys I work with are usually like alpha type guys, type A personality. They want to do everything. They want to cross every I, dot every T, be as optimized as possible. But in the process of building their business or taking care of their family or whatever it is in life, they kind of wake up when they're 45 or 55 one day and realize that they've spent years neglecting their own health and they're broken. They're emotionally broken. They're obviously physically broken and they need help with it. And I think, whether it's you guys at Eternity or wherever it is, if they come to me for coaching, whatever it is, it's one of those things that it's kind of like a business. You want to work on it and not in it all the time. And I think when it comes to our health, we really need to take a step back and work on our health. And thank goodness for the people at Eternity that help do that. But it really is a travesty and a sad thing that you see a lot of men in their 40s and 50s struggling with.
We see it too. I think many men also kind of normalize feeling less than their best, fatigue, weight gain, energy decline, the brain fog. We're kind of like, we've kind of normalized, just pull yourself up by your bootstraps. I'm just getting older, rather than recognizing those signs as something maybe, really kind of out of balance.
Yeah. I will say for me personally, a lot of the guys that I've coached, obviously I'm not a medical professional whatsoever, but a lot of the guys I've coached and helped just on whether it's their hormone journey or peptide journey, whatever it is. So many of them, when I ask them how they feel, they actually don't know what that means. Like you said, they kind of have just defaulted to being in a state where they don't feel that good. And as you know, the average lab range of what is considered normal testosterone has moved down and down and down and down. And now we have guys walking around with like a 400 or 500 total testosterone. And that is considered not only normal, but actually like optimal, according to a lot of medical professionals, which is really sad because, as you know, so many guys can have what would be considered normal testosterone and actually be suffering from a severe deficiency. So when a lot of guys, I ask them like, hey, how do you feel? They've kind of normalized to a default state where they don't feel that good. And then on top of that, they've been, for lack of a better word, they've been gaslighted by the medical establishment or their friends and family. And there's nothing wrong with them. And so they kind of feel like there's nowhere to turn because in one side they feel sick or unwell, and then the other side they're being told that nothing's wrong with them.
Right. I think there's an awareness. There's been a big shift in the paradigm in this whole industry. I mean, thanks to your channel and a lot of other, Huberman and Peter Attia and Rhonda Patrick, and there's a lot more subscribers and a lot of great information that's out there now instead of the bro science we had back then. But that when I started this 15 years ago and finding really great. I'm not a provider or a physician either, but I'm good at I got a passion about this stuff as you do. You know, we like to stay on the cutting edge, and I like to find really good providers and kind of match them with patients who, you know, they can be a good team for their journey. But traditional healthcare, you know, it's always, like you said, in this really kind of finite reference range of, you know, oh, you're normal, go home. Normal is not optimal. Big difference in that. You know, you could feel normal. I mean, you could be normal in that range, but have all these symptoms and feel terrible and all these things. And, you know, I had one of our providers describe to me, she's like, you know, throw the labs in the trash can. You know, it's like so many people want to go by the labs and the little numbers and things. You know, you got to use the labs, but use the labs as a guide only. And, you know, but treat the patient's symptoms, you know, when you're kind of working with whether it's TRT or you know, looking at adrenals, thyroids, you know, testosterone or peptides or mitochondrial function. You know, we use these agents as optimizers, enhancers, and, you know, but we want the symptoms to disappear within the first 2 to 3 months. So you said it at the beginning, you know, I can like my message kind of to men is like, your family needs you healthy, your business needs you healthy, you know, your future kind of depends on you to be healthy. So, you know, taking, you know, like you said, the misconceptions, you know, taking care of your health isn't selfish. It's kind of one of the most important responsibilities you have. And I know, Hunter, you work with a lot of, I mean, you know, successful millionaire, billionaire, you know, clients, and we do too. We got a big celebrity list and the same thing. You know, those men all have coaches. You know, they all have mentors in this space. So it's not selfish. You know, and for you to be kind of at your best, you know, you need to kind of really focus on this stuff and be more preventative. Don't wait to, you know, fix it when it's broken.
Yeah, I will say, guys that I work with, you know what's interesting? I'd be interested to hear if you've seen this as a trend. Like 10 years ago, a lot of guys didn't know that they needed testosterone replacement. So you had a lot of guys that would be, you know, 40s, 50s, 60s, whatever, and they're
Mhm.
like, "Hey, I don't feel as good as I was," but they didn't realize that testosterone replacement was an option or even something that they
Yeah,
might have needed to do. Fast forward
yeah,
to today, there's so much information out there. Like you said, there's so many influencers and whatever. Most
mhm,
men over 35 or 40 know that that is an option. What I
yeah,
will say, I wouldn't say I've struggled with this, but I see a lot of guys struggling with this when they come to me, or I'm sure come to you guys, is they're actually kind of afraid. Like they're afraid of this commitment to testosterone replacement. I get so many messages every single day, whether it's people in my coaching group or people that just reach out to me and they're like, I hear you. Like they follow all of my content online. They're like, I hear you. I know my hormones are important, but I have these reservations about testosterone. Fertility, I have these reservations about a lifelong commitment. I have these reservations about, you know, my hematocrit going up, whatever it
right,
is, like anything and everything that they've read online about why testosterone replacement is bad. And I think
yeah,
now we've gone from this to like where 10 years ago there wasn't even an awareness about it, that people realized that that was an option for treatment they could do, to now it's like everyone's pretty aware of it, but there's a lot of
yeah.
hesitation and reluctance around that. Is that
There,
something that you see a lot
there
too?
is, and I think that's kind of going to be the last stage of the demonization with all this. You know, 10, 15 years or 15 years ago when I got into this space, men didn't know it was their testosterone. They came in with the metabolic symptoms, the weight gain. You know, they're not on the golf course, they're not riding their motorcycle anymore. You know, kind of just the loss of motivation. And we pointed out, hey, you know, testosterone can do a lot of great things for you. And then 2, 3 months later, after being on, it was like they said, you know, wiping the fog off the goggles, and they were like, "Man, I had no idea. That's it's crazy. You know, that's what it was." You know, my doctor never mentioned any of this to me. I think more now today, men are coming in, they already know what they want, right? They're watching you, they're watching other podcast guys, and they're like, man, I really, with all this information out there, I really think it's my testosterone. I'd like to get started in testosterone. They're educated in a lot of this stuff, you know, 10, 15. We've been doing peptides for over 10 years, and we're kind of seeing this craze right now or of awareness. You know, back then it was like, well, BPC 157 is going to help you with repairing, and pentosan polysulfate, great for the cartilage and the remodeling of cartilage and the breakdown, and then TB4, you know, the whole Wolverine protocol. Now they come in knowing, you know, they can be an expert in 5 minutes just going through Chat GPT and watching a couple podcasts, but they're coming in very well informed. And I sit down with my providers and I'll coordinate more education. And I'm like, y'all, you really got to have answers for a lot of these questions. It's just interesting to kind of see the shift there with a lot of this. And as far as the misconceptions or a lot of the demonization, those are very easy to dispel, as you know, with a 5-second conversation, especially with the fertility of TRT. I'm like, no, it doesn't. It doesn't cause you to be infertile. I mean, there are all kinds of things we can take while you're on TRT to keep fertility intact. We always have that hard, conversation. Do you want to father children while on TRT? Well, you need to do this, and this. You'll be fine. And then, if you're that worried about it, enclomophene's always, a great resource. Hematocrit, blood dump, or just microdose throughout the week with testosterone. You don't see the influx of estradiol or DHT or PSA. Smaller dosages more frequently. So we can dispel a lot of those really quick, and it's never really. I think a lot of guys are relieved, and it also kind of separates you as the expert. They're kind of like, oh, I've heard from different providers, you're going to be infertile, you're never going to be able to have kids again. And when we come across with great confidence, and we've done this with thousands of men, they all got babies. It's a lot of confidence with them.
Yeah. I think to that too, to the provider question, it's rare that a doctor, let's just take your PCP, for instance. So rare that a doctor is going to even know anything about testosterone, let alone like how to optimize someone's hormones. Then you move into like our world where it's like, okay, now you have TRT clinics, HRT clinics, longevity medicine. It's like every name you can put on it. But then you go into that, and I would say like even 75 to 80% of that is still behind the times when it comes to prescribing, and it comes to, especially on the men's side, of suppressing estrogen, messing with DHT, like doing all these things. That's like in some places very commonplace to still crush guys' estrogen into the toilet the moment they start TRT. It's a huge issue, because as much as like we've seen the market shift to like where we have awareness about testosterone now, when you get into nuanced stuff, it's not just going down to the corner and finding the clinic that says TRT on the window and then like you're on your way, because a lot of times you might go down the wrong path.
That's the problem now, though, right? It's like, I feel like there's so many traditional doctors that are jumping the fence now that want to get into a cash paying clinic. They want to do this, and I don't blame them. Traditional healthcare is kind of a mess, and the insurance reimbursement is literally nothing. But they just don't have the experience. So men will, join one of these run-of-the-mill clinics where there's a PA or NP who's been doing this after a weekend course, and they're not managed right. And and there's those little nuances that come with experience. 15 years ago, it was like you started a guy on testosterone, you gave him anastrozole whether they needed it or not. Testosterone good, estrogen bad. But long time ago, you realized estrogen is actually wonderful, and it's your bones need it, your heart needs it. You need it to kind of do this diurnal flow as it does with testosterone and manage it. And same thing with DHEA, but there's a lot of misinformation out there. I just turned 50 last week, and I went for my urology appointment that every man's got to go do for that old DRE. And I'm very tongue in cheek with traditional doctors, because you don't know which side of the fence they kind of sit on. And he's a urologist, and we're talking about the company I have and stuff. And I go, we do a lot of men's health, a lot of hormone. He's like, oh, like testosterone? He's like, yeah, they've done a lot of research, that, and testosterone, it doesn't really do much for men. And I've just kind of learned to just kind of go, oh yeah, well, it's interesting. People seem to feel a little bit better, but that's really interesting. I'll kind of look into that. I just don't get in these dogfights with the traditional kind of doctors anymore.
I think Upton Sinclair said, don't teach a man that which it depends on his income not understanding. So, like some of those doctors, it's like I think what's interesting about testosterone is, you look at it when you do what you guys do, which is like hormones first, and then, hey, if peptides are a good fit and that works too, you're addressing the root cause of so many issues that people struggle with. And I would say, like, from the traditional medicine, especially Western medicine side of things, like you're healing like 90, 95% of what that person's going to deal with later in life if you fix those things.
Mhm.
And so if
Yeah.
you're running a business around people that are sick, it's actually probably not the smartest thing to fix their testosterone, because it's going to solve some of the other issues that that person's
Yeah.
probably going to have, whether it's heart disease, cancer, or whatever it is. There's so many upstream things that testosterone fixes.
Yeah. Well, it's even like this week, one of our providers is working with a patient with H. pylori, and and she's new to us, but very very well versed in the hormones and things. But when you start talking about gut and mold, you really have to go down this rabbit hole and really learn everything. But then you always come back to like, oh, it really is just these simple little pieces that kind of, it's this underlying kind of root cause. And when you have to learn everything and go on that journey, they wanted you to do the antibiotics, they want you to do the PPIs and do these things. And when you come back to it, it's like, oh, it really comes down to inflammation and diet and insulin resistance. And like you said, testosterone and our GLP-1, managing A1C and blood sugars, like if you do that, there's this cascading reflex of all these root causes that, just kind of get fixed with inflammation. And I mean, it makes our provider's job, once that light bulb goes off, very, very easy. We had one provider who was like a kitchen sink. She was very passionate about it, but kitchen sink provider, and like to throw, oh, we do all these supplements and do all, the hormones. We're going to do it all at once. Well, if you're not like a biohacker really into the stuff, it's not very sustainable. And then I had another provider that was like, don't be a kitchen sink provider. Just start them on a couple key supplements, do the hormones, let's maybe do some mitochondria stuff, like very, very simple stuff that everybody can do. And you're gonna achieve those top 2, 3 things that the patients complain about within the first 2 or 3 months. Once they kind of see that the light bulb goes off, they're gonna be very inquisitive on, oh, what else can you do? And then we'll start talking about longevity and plasmapheresis and ozone and more peptides, stem cells, all the wonderful things that we can kind of do here.
Yeah, the term inflammaging, which is like inflammation and aging
Yeah.
together, is like the buzzword right now, but it's so true. I mean, look no further than like the GLPs. I think one of the biggest travesties with the GLPs is that a lot of those people are getting on GLPs without evaluating their hormones first. And you put those two things together, there's not a lot of data that submerge on this yet. And I don't know that there ever will be, because unless it's just like analysis they're looking at with people. But there's a new study that came out. I think it's for women that were on tirzepatide that were also on BHRT. They looked at milligram for milligram how much weight loss they had on tirzepatide with or without BHRT. And the ones on HRT had 35% greater weight loss. I think greater than like 80% of them had 20% or more of their body weight loss, as opposed to like 40% that were not on HRT. So it really is like GLPs. I love them. I'm a huge fan of them. But it's also too, what you have, it kind of goes back to the same thing. You have these clinics that are just churn and burn, throw them out, get people hooked on them, and they lose 70 pounds, but then all of a sudden they have neuroendocrine dysfunction because they have no hormones to begin with. And then it's even worse because they've starved themselves for a year, and their thyroid's starting to shut down, their hormones are starting to shut down. So it really is one of those things, like it takes a provider that understands the nuances of all that to fix that. But if you do it right, it can be miraculous for a lot of people.
Yeah, and that's why, like we talked about, like prioritizing it, coming in early, being preventative. Don't wait. So many people are like killing themselves in the gym or with diet, trying to really kind of, what is the scale reading? How do I look? And they're wearing their joints out over training. They're running too much. They're starving themselves, and they're really kind of they're inflammaging, and they got major inflammation and aging, faster than they'd like. When you have the right nutrition, when you're eating the right amount of protein per pound of body weight, when the hormones are optimized, you get those results back you got, when you were like in your 20s kind of working out. But I just know, like, you remember the days of metformin. Like metformin was touted as the best longevity. You hear Huberman talking about it all the time. Not a lot of people can take metformin. Even if you ever use it in clinical practice, our providers are like, people are having diarrhea, people are having stomach upsets. Berberine is so much of a better, supplement to take with none of those side effects. Works exactly the same, just as potent. But it's interesting to see how metformin was like, oh, it's the best longevity drug. That was very studied. And the data that came out with even autophagy and telomerase and all these things, and seeing these improvements. But it's a blood sugar. It's a first defense in diabetes. It's blood sugar medication. And the GLP-1s are nothing more than a really souped up version of metformin that work on so many different enzymatic pathways to do sort of the same thing. And also, when you look at like all the big five, more causes of morbidity for men and women, dementias and metabolic syndrome, cardiovascular disease, it all kind of boils down to a blood sugar. It's all a blood sugar. It's all an insulin resistance sort of thing. So, a one trick pony is, optimize your hormones, do a little GLP-1. It could be that easy to fix all your aging deficits.
Yeah. Well, to the point about the clinics, part of what I do is vetting clinics because I have thousands and thousands of people that come to me and they're like, hey, where do I go to get all the things that you talk about online? And so I've been a member at several different clinics. I've kind of seen the whole spectrum of like your bargain basement pricing all the way up to concierge medicine. And what I think is really important is to have a provider that understands all those. And sometimes that is not necessarily a price thing. Like I've seen like really, really expensive places that don't really know that much when it comes to blood work. And I've seen places that are a lot cheaper, maybe like a local place with like a very good provider that understands those things. And so when we look at like, hey, what metrics, I think it's very important and incumbent on the provider to be able to understand someone's blood work. So I've even seen clinics that will treat people without blood work. Now, I think symptoms are as important as blood work. The blood work is kind of a goalpost, right? Like I'm a big football fan. Like the goalpost is like, okay, I know the ball needs to go between that goalpost, but a lot of times it's like diagnosing how does this person feel. So the labs kind of inform the decision making, but it's not everything. And I know some of those places they just say, hey, you have erectile dysfunction, here's this, or you don't feel good, here's this. And well, I think in a lot of cases testosterone probably is the answer. I think it's very irresponsible on their part to treat people based on that, because when it comes to this, it is something that you really do have to have a personalized approach to it. So to the point about the blood work, one thing, it's kind of funny because a lot of the typical blood work, like one of those clinics would do, won't even include the things that I look at, whether it's around men's health or metabolic health. I think when you look at testosterone, you have total testosterone and you have free testosterone, where your total testosterone can be 1,500 or it could be 900 with a free testosterone of 30. I think if I know a man's free testosterone, I can actually like be inside his head and know his physical feeling and his emotional feeling, whereas the total testosterone doesn't really tell that much. And then you have some doctors that don't even get the free testosterone measured on the lab work. And so it's like, how are you going to treat a patient if you don't even understand the amount of bioavailable testosterone that he has to understand like where he's at? And so that's a big one. Another big one for me is like understanding fasting insulin. And so you have hemoglobin A1C, you have fasting blood sugar. Those could be good metrics, but those are, even the A1C is going to be a more transient marker of where that person was the last 3 months versus like how much insulin is their pancreas pumping out today in order to bring down blood sugar. And so for me, blood glucose and A1C are great, but if I know someone's fasting insulin, it almost makes those other numbers much less relevant, because I know like how hard is that person's pancreas working, which to me is going to be a leading indicator of like how much metabolic dysfunction and inflammation are they going to have in the next 5 to 10 years. And so it's nuances like that that are things that you would not see like on a typical blood panel that to me, I look at is like upstream things that drive where I know that person's health is going to be in the next 2 to 3 years versus like what, their fasting blood sugar might be, which doesn't tell them really anything, because they could have had a bad day the day before, or like ate late from the night before, and their fasting blood sugar is going to be higher. So
yeah, I see the same thing too. It's like you get what you pay for, right? And people that just they give the labs for free. There's a couple places here, very very basic labs. It's just a TSH of the thyroid, a total testosterone. And it's like, gosh, that tells me nothing about the thyroid. First of all, just TSH. Like, you want to see the free, like you said, you want to see the free bioavailable levels, the free testosterone, the free T3. These are the only hormones that are biologically active in the body doing anything at all. And that A1C and the fasting insulin is, it's fasting glucose. Yeah, just kind of tells me what you ate in the last 24 hours, whereas the A1C is how the blood sugar has been behaving in the last 3 months. So the labs are very important. Like you said, it can be a goalpost, and you have to run very comprehensive blood work. Um, but at the end of the day, they're just don't treat the labs, treat the patient. But you got to have that benchmark to start anywhere, because you can, like you said, you can kind of be in that person's head. You can kind of see what's been going on. The labs, to a trained provider, it tells a story of what's been going on in the patient for the last, at least 3 months, 6 months, a year. Our providers have been doing this forever, and they're very well trained. It's like chewing bubblegum for them. They know how to plug and play certain things. They're in their head. They know exactly, like you said, how they're feeling, and they've been through it before. I feel like a lot of the providers that work here, they have a story. They've had a Lyme disease issue. They've had a bad case of SIBO, and they didn't find the help in their own specialty in traditional healthcare, and they found some little guy hiding out in New Mexico doing functional medicine that was a guru with something. I mean, that was my experience too. I'm not a provider, but I had some endocrine stuff. My dad had a pituitary tumor and had to go through some stuff, and I've had some endocrine stuff myself too. But and I was doing nuclear medicine at the time. I'm ablating thyroids with radioactive isotopes, and I'm like, there's got to be a better way to help people. The answers are just not here. And then found functional medicine and kind of took off with it. But yeah, it's interesting though, with running the right amount of labs and working with a trained provider.
You know what? It's funny. A lot of people associate testosterone with erections. And so a lot of like a proxy for a guy in his head, and this would just be like in pop culture, is like, oh, are my erections good? Then I don't have a testosterone issue. And I think that's actually probably like 7 or 8 things down the totem pole that I would actually use as a way to assess whether a guy is suffering from a testosterone deficiency. And again, erections can be fixed with like Cialis or Viagra. Like that's something that, testosterone is not necessarily, it will enhance, but it's also not going to be one of the first things a guy looks at. Now, I will say, in my experience, this has happened in my own life. Almost always it is much more of an emotional state issue with a man that you will notice first, like the symptoms of low testosterone. So a lot of cases, he might be more irritable than he typically is based on his personality. In a lot of cases, he could be like very stressed from work, and he doesn't have the same stress resilience that maybe he did when he was younger. And a lot of cases, it could be a relationship thing, whether it's with his spouse or people that he works with. He notices that he doesn't show up the same way. And unfortunately, in today's age, it's becoming more and more common, suffering from depression and anxiety. And so I see so many guys that are, typically like who I would work with, or usually like someone that is a high performer, and they have like all of a sudden this like depression and anxiety out of nowhere. Their sex life may be still great. They may like look healthy. They may exercise and train and do all the things, but they have this depression, anxiety, and inability to cope with stress that at one point in their life, they probably did pretty well. And I think that is usually for me what I see guys struggling with, and they kind of don't know where to turn. Again, they may get their blood work done, and the doctor tells them their total testosterone is fine, and it's not an issue. When in reality, that could be something. And so, for me, I think it's much more. Obviously, the physical piece is a component, so like extra body fat, fatigue, things like that. But I think what in my life made the greatest difference when I solved this problem for myself was that like emotional component of it, to like where you have the ability to cope with the stress of life and actually be resilient to stress, and then also to have purpose and motivation and drive and things like that. So probably not what most guys would associate with low testosterone. But I know if you take a guy and you have him go from where he is unoptimized to optimized, almost always it's not, hey, my erections are better now, or hey, like I have a six pack now. It's my life is so much better because emotionally I feel fulfilled. I'm in a very good place when it comes to my mental health. And so I think, like it's not why people usually come to get their testosterone fixed, but it's usually the biggest needle mover in a guy's life.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, same on my end. And what a lot of providers have kind of told me, what they see in our clinic and kind of the own clinical kind of studies we do with our patients. It's the brain changes. And I'm kind of like over here with my hand up saying, well, I could have told you that too, because like Hunter, we have our own kind of personal stories. And, I hit 35 and testosterone tanked. I had, just kind of poor hormones to kind of begin with. But yeah, you lose the everyday motivation. The anxiety and depression kind of crept in a little bit unknowing, but you never think it's your testosterone. Like you said, you associate testosterone with erections and things like that, but it's your lion and it's your drive. And I think it's why so many successful men have, like I said, they prioritize this. And you need to do it not only for your family, your business, but like for yourself, for that drive, for that mental health. I mean, there's so much data coming out now with like testosterone and hormones and their effectiveness versus the last 40 years of using Prozac or SSRIs. And I mean, the information is just kind of overwhelming. There's thousands of receptors, testosterone receptors in the brain, in the heart, all these areas that, we don't really associate it with it. And that's kind of the big message to men. It's like, it's not just about the six pack and getting on the scale. It's about, your relationships with your wife. It's funny. We see men and their kids and things like that, but we see men come in and to get optimized, or women come in, get optimized. And then they're here, their partner's here. And they're like, man, I really need to get my wife in. I'm to see you guys. I'm a different person. And I'm like, yeah, you guys should really come in as couples. Because this is not just about six pack and being able to lift more or work out harder. It's about really your relationships and that psychological component of life.
Yeah, well, I'll start by saying, there's obviously like different price points, and some companies, they're going to maximize revenue and minimize costs, right? And it's strictly going to be a numbers game of how they do it. And when you look at a company like that, an example of how that goes is you might have a 20-minute virtual appointment, and that's what you get. And you get 20 minutes squeezed in on a calendar of a provider that has, 8 hours worth of 20-minute appointments all day. And really, when you look at that, I'm not saying that can't work for some people, but is that any different than what I would get if I just went down the street to my PCP and I see a guy that is seeing 40 or 50 people a day? He doesn't know what's going on. He just wants to come you through, write your meds, and get off. Contrast that with Eternity. The first time I get on a call, it's at least an hour long, where they're going through a comprehensive review of not only my current labs, but then also history of what I went through. And again, I've seen it all. Like I've been through it all. I've seen all the different value segments of this market. And what I appreciate is, one, as I was going through that call, I knew the providers that I was with had done this hundreds, if not thousands of times with other people. Meaning that, like, I know a doctor, like Michael was saying earlier, that took a weekend class and now all of a sudden he's out and he's got a shingle out doing hormones and stuff, which again, everyone has to start somewhere. But when I went through that first call, I knew this was someone that had been here before. And even for me, with my extensive knowledge of blood work and helping people and coaching people, there were things that they picked up on my blood work that, one, no other provider had before, and two, that I wouldn't have even really considered myself to look at and say, like, hey, maybe we could optimize this a little bit more around these specific areas that I wouldn't have even known before. So for me, as someone that is in this industry, obviously not a doctor, but has seen thousands of people's blood work, that was very reassuring to me to know that the people that I was with, one, it was a team behind them, and also had the experience from a treatment perspective to be able to work with me. And I think that's the last piece that's really important. Is a lot of times a doctor is either talking at someone or talking down to someone. And I've seen that too, as again, they're the doctor, they're going to be the one prescribing, and that works for certain people. It's okay. Before I did all of this, I was a real estate agent. And I figured out, I started when I was very young as a real estate agent. I figured out early on, the most important thing I could do was listen to people and actually meet them where they were at. And the better that I did that, all of a sudden, like, the more my clients liked me and the better results they had in their own life. I think it's very, very important for a medical provider to be able to actually listen to where a person is and meet them where they are. And if they have certain requests for certain things, not being dogmatic about those things. Obviously, you have a philosophical principles that you go back to, but not being dogmatic about those things and actually listening to where the patient is rather than just writing them off. Because it's very easy for a provider, they're going to see however many people per day to be like, oh yeah, I just had 5 of these people and they were all the same, but they're actually not. And if the patient feels heard, they're going to get better results because they know that doctor has their best interest in mind. So for me, I think that was the most important thing, is to feel heard and to know that, like, hey, this person understands where I'm coming from. They understand my background. They've treated people like that before, and they're actually going to work with me rather than just working to, talk down to me or talk at me.
Yeah, no, I think you kind of nailed it there. And I think to be really great, like with the top providers I've worked with in the past, that's how they're able to kind of formulate and find solutions to the whole puzzle, is listening to people. I mean, in order to be really great at functional integrative longevity care, you have the labs, you're looking at they've written down their top 3 chief complaints, what they want to work with. And it's not until you go through the blood work explaining how each lab works in your body, which I meet with our providers after each consult, and we talk about it. We kind of, if it's telemedicine, it's usually recorded, we kind of review it together, and we're always in a big think tank together, which I always love that about specialty groups where there's like 5 orthopedic surgeons, 6 dermatologists. We do the same thing here. It's not just a provider kind of going through the motions. All our providers meet, I'm in there, usually our management team's in there. We kind of put together, it's a whole group effort. But to actually listen to the patient, all of a sudden the light bulb goes off in the provider's head. She's like, oh yeah, we've done this, like you said, 1,000 times. And in order to, once you listen to somebody, you're really able to put together the pieces of the pie to really come up with a great treatment plan for them. But it was interesting. I met with the provider that saw Hunter and his wife after the consult, and she's done this 1,000 times. Generally, we don't have people that come so educated. And it was one of those things where it's kind of like she kind of felt a little self-conscious. She's like, there's nothing I can really show or teach these people. I was like, well, there's a couple little things that you guys kind of spoke about that was really good, and Hunter kind of told me that was like kind of key pieces for him. So that was great. But it made her feel a little insecure working with them, because they're like, man, they know exactly what they wanted. They've already been down this route, and man, we were able to just kind of deliver that for them. But I think that's why that whole hour and a half conversation, just kind of like what we're doing now, with the patient, is so important, and listening to kind of formulate that plan.
To the people out there, don't take offense to any of this, because this is like what I see hundreds, if not thousands of times a week. So I will have a man come to me, and obviously a lot of people follow me for peptide information. Not a lot of people are directly seeking out hormone information. I always tell people that right now peptides are the biggest gateway to HRT, because peptides are so hot. Everyone wants them. Everyone wants to get their hands on them. So I will see a guy, he comes to me, joins my group or whatever, and he will be on, kid you not, 15 to 20 different peptides all at the same time. He's taking this, 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 and he still doesn't understand why he doesn't feel better. And the first question I always ask them is, have you got your lab work done, and what is your testosterone like? And I'll usually get 2 answers. One, he'll just say my testosterone is good, to which he doesn't even know what he's talking about. He just thinks his testosterone is good because he got a 400 on lab work 2 years ago, and that's fine. Or 2, he just doesn't know. And he's like, oh, I've actually never thought of that. I thought that I could just take these supplements or take these peptides and that would fix it. And I always have to reel them back in and say, hey, look, we need to throw probably 90 to 95% of those peptides away or set them aside for a later date, and actually address the root foundations of your health, which is your hormones. Perhaps no other hormone is important for men or women, but especially men, is testosterone. And until most guys get that optimized, none of the peptides are going to matter. None of the supplements are going to matter. None of the cold plunges, none of the sauna, none of the IVs, none of the going to CrossFit at 5 a.m. None of that is going to matter until you get the hormones dialed in first, because that is your foundation. I like to tell people, a good analogy is like, hormones are the house and the peptides are, and the supplements are the furniture. You wouldn't put really nice furniture in a rundown house, because it's going to get ruined. It's going to get dirty. It's going to get, it's going to break. So I always tell people that, like, hormones are the foundational piece. And unfortunately, that's not something you can go order off of Amazon or order from a website and have it show up to your house in 2 days. It's something that you have to get in touch with a good provider that's going to walk you through the process, especially for a lot of guys that first year, to where there is just like some fluctuations to where they need their hand held to the point where they feel very comfortable. To which, like, once a guy gets optimized in the second or third year, most of the time it's smooth sailing from there. And if he's doing healthy and living healthy, he's set. But a lot of guys get nervous in that first, 6 to 12 months because they don't know what to expect, and they want to make sure that they're doing things right. And so for me, I always remind people that hormones are the foundation, and you can't go spend, 500 or $1,000 on peptides and thinking in 3 months that you're going to get fixed, because you're not. You always have to go back to the hormones. Then once you get those fixed, peptides are amazing. Obviously, I extol the virtues of peptides to anyone that will listen, but without hormones, peptides aren't going to do anything. All the other biohacking stuff that's so popular in today's culture, it's kind of like you almost have like AI and biohacking are like the two big things right now. And until you get the hormone piece fixed, none of those things that sound sexy or do really well on social media are really going to matter until you get the hormones fixed.
Yeah, there's a pecking order with a lot of this, right? And the guys like Hunter, myself, and people who've been in this industry a long time have churned, hundreds, if not thousands of patients through them, or clients. There's definitely a cringe factor that we see, and it's like all these things we do, they're really just enhancers. But if you're not fixing sleep, stress, movement, nutrition first, none of these other things are going to work. Or looking at hormones first and foremost. I mean, you can fix a lot with just testosterone and GLP-1s, but we see patients not really getting results they want. And then when we sit down and have a powwow session with them, it's like, oh, you're still eating McDonald's, staying up super late, and drinking a fifth of Jack Daniels every night. Well, maybe, that might be the issue. Why? But, it definitely, when people are really trying to get out and work out and do things and they're achy, they're not motivated, testosterone will. I mean, it's the closest thing to a magic bullet we have. And everybody's looking for that magic bullet, right? But if you're still trying to get out there and still doing I tell people, C plus, B minus on your working out and eating well. But if you can it's like a marriage. If you can meet me halfway with that, I'm telling you, the GLP-1s, the hormones, there's a couple little peptides will kind of take you across the finish line and make you less achy, make you more motivated, to get out there and kind of reach those goals. You'll see those effects more. But yeah, we get peptide guys that come in, they're running 20 different peptides, and it's like, okay, great. Yeah, you just ran the SLU PP. You just ran, that's just an amplifier, and you run while you're super tired and you feel like crap now. It's like your mitochondria was in really bad shape before, and now you've just amplified that. Like, there's some things we can do to like fix your mitochondria and the AMPK, the mTOR cycle, intercellularly first, and then let's amplify some other things. But people kind of need that. That's where they need that. They call it a practice for a reason. You're practicing on patients for years until you find out a good clinical things, and you can watch all the YouTube videos in the world you want, but until you kind of work with a provider that can kind of put this all kind of together for you, that has the experience, that's really kind of the secret, I think, to people being success. Like I said, 10, 15 years ago, people would come to us and they're like, oh, I've never heard of BPC. Oh, I didn't know about testosterone. And it was very easy just to get people going. Now people are coming in a lot more educated and like, oh, I'm pretty certain it's my testosterone. I'd really like to look into these peptides, and they know quite a bit of information. So the problem has kind of shifted. But now we're seeing, like we said, the problem of men, especially, I don't know if they have a tendency to get turned off quicker, but men will usually try 2 or 3 different times, go to a provider, not have success because the provider wasn't educated in this field, kind of fall off, and then kind of give up. Women usually have a tendency to kind of stay in there, stay with their girlfriends, and they'll usually find solutions quicker. But I think a lot of men fall off their search to kind of fix the root cause of these issues. And there's just a lot of providers out there that are not well trained in this, that, like I said, took a little weekend course and starting to do it. So find a good provider seems to be the issue or the problem now. And Hunter and I have a mutual friend who started a fantastic platform where he goes out and is actually vetting these providers. I mean, he vetted me really hard, and our providers was like, man, these are some great questions and stuff. But we've become one of their kind of premier clinics here. It's kind of how Hunter and I kind of got together. But I think what he's providing, linking patients with skilled providers, is going to really kind of help a lot of the issues that I see, in today's day with, just men and women kind of getting the care that they kind of deserve.
Yeah. I'll just second that and say that's a huge thing of a lot of guys will go, usually like 3 is the max. They'll go to 1, 2, or 3 different providers. And for lack of a better word, they get quacked. And then they're just like, oh, testosterone's not for me. A lot of times it could have been the delivery system for them. It could have been the methodology of the practice. It could have been the dosing. It could have been a ton of things, but they often conflate, oh, the provider that I had with testosterone therapy. And as Mike and I know, like if you get a guy, like the thing about guys too, is they're usually a little bit easier than women to optimize. So like I can take a guy and say, hey, if you do these things and you listen to me, you're going to be good to go. But unfortunately, a lot of practices are not doing that. And so they conflate like, oh, testosterone wasn't for me because they didn't have a good experience with it. And as Mike and I know, like, if you give us a guy and you say, hey, this is what he's struggling with, I know I can fix him in most cases. It's just kind of one of those things like they went down the wrong path and then they decide it's not for them.
Yeah. And it's just like, it makes you kind of angry, at a certain point. It's like, well, yeah, he was giving me one big shot of testosterone every 3 weeks and my nipples hurt. And then I felt like complete crap the last 2 weeks. And it's like, oh God, like, there's a very easy, simple way to do this. It's just a shame that they went to a couple of providers that are still in the dark ages of doing this. I got, as Hunter does, I got 1,000,001 stories of where I'm just kind of like, that doctor did what? Like, where did he even come up with this formula? It's just, it's crazy. But patients are coming in more informed over the last 10 years. Same thing with our providers. I mean, I was like, we were all celebrating when the black box warning came off testosterone for OBGYNs to start using it. I was like, fantastic. And then also that 2002 Women's Health Initiative, which completely demonized hormones for women with, we're worried about cancer and all that. The medical journals pulled that article. They were like, hey, actually, hormones are wonderful for women and men. But yeah, the JAMA very, very rarely pulls an article that's been published. Once it's printed and the ink's dry, it's truth. But they actually pulled that. So it's, I don't want to say traditional is bad. We need traditional healthcare. You get cancer, you break your arm, you need it. You also need a functional medicine, optimized guy that understands, being preventative. Like you need both those as kind of like your team. And I think that's when we're really going to kind of fix this America's kind of medical system, is when both sides can get together and kind of sing kumbaya. Fortunately, it's been traditional beating up on us, some functional guys beating up on traditional medicine, but it's like, no, you can see we both kind of need each other. Traditional is great for trauma. We're great for optimization and preventative. So I think it's when we're really going to see kind of a fix in the whole system moving forward. And we're almost there. People are waking up. Well, thank you, Hunter, for being here. And where can people find you online?
Yeah, of course. Just find me. My website is hunterwilliamshealth.com. So it sounds exactly like it's spelled, hunterwilliamshealth.com. I'm on social media and stuff, but you never know. I've had every single social media platform deleted at some point for talking about the topics we discussed today. So hunterwilliamshealth.com, you can go there and then also sign up for my email newsletter there. That's the best way to stay in touch with me because, with the socials, you never know when those may go down.
Well, thank you, Hunter, for being on the show. Look forward to talking to you in the future.
Thanks for having me, Mike, and look forward to coming back hopefully very soon.